By the winter of 1863, the war that had torn America apart for 3 long years was entering its deadliest chapter. The Union had clawed its way through victories and losses alike, and the Confederacy was reeling, yet unbroken. 2 men would soon define the final act of this conflict: Ulysses S. Grant, a relentless strategist whose reputation for stubborn endurance preceded him, and Robert E. Lee, the brilliant commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, revered by his men, feared by his enemies. It was a collision of wills, of armies, of destinies. And the stage for this confrontation was Virginia, a land of dense forests, muddy rivers, and crossroads that would soon run red with blood. Grant had a plan. Simple, yet audacious. He intended not merely to fight Lee, but to destroy him. And to do so, he would leverage the full might of the Union, striking simultaneously on multiple fronts, leaving the Confederacy no safe haven, no moment of respite. Grant's elevation to general-in-chief in March of 1864 was no accident. Lincoln had grown weary of the indecisive leadership of Henry Halleck. Where Halleck had hesitated, Grant acted. Where others had faltered, he pressed on. His victory at Chattanooga had proven he could coordinate armies with precision. Now, entrusted with the fate of the nation, Grant demanded the freedom to execute his strategy without political interference, a gamble that would define his legacy and test the endurance of every soldier under his command. The plan was audacious. Sherman would strike from the west, marching through Georgia to crush the Army of Tennessee and capture Atlanta. Banks was to move on Mobile, though history would later show him distracted elsewhere. Sigel would cut Lee's supplies from the Shenandoah Valley, but Virginia remained the main stage. There Grant would pit the Army of the Potomac, numbering more than 120,000 men, against Lee's 90,000. The goal to find Lee in the field, engage him, and grind his army into submission, whether Lee liked it or not. Reorganizing the Army of the Potomac was the first step. Veteran units, weakened by years of attrition, were combined and consolidated. New recruits replaced those lost, and artillerymen from Washington's forts were converted to infantry. George Meade remained in command tactically, while Grant coordinated the strategic movements, following a simple maxim: wherever Lee goes, there you will go. This unity of command was unprecedented and essential. The 2 men, Grant and Meade, would operate as one mind, one body, against a foe who had mastered defensive warfare over years of campaigns. By May 3, 1864, the Union forces were ready, roads dry, men prepared, and the Rapidan River crossed. Grant's army advanced into the dense forests known as the Wilderness. Here, the very earth seemed to conspire against movement. Narrow paths slowed entire columns. Visibility was measured in feet, not miles. And yet, the army pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the nation rested on their shoulders. Lee had anticipated Grant's movement. He deployed his corps across the Wilderness, spreading Hill and Ewell to intercept any Union advance, while Longstreet remained at Gordonsville, prepared for sweeping maneuvers. On May 5th, Union cavalry discovered Confederate positions, and what followed was chaos incarnate. Trees caught fire, men were burned alive in the underbrush, and the Iron Brigade, the pride of the Union, broke through the line only to be isolated and driven back. The Wilderness was not a battlefield. It was a furnace, a nightmare where strategy collided with the uncontrollable forces of nature. Grant's response was relentless. He refused to retreat. Unlike previous Union commanders who might have pulled back to regroup, Grant pressed south, maneuvering through the forest with a single-minded focus: Lee must be engaged, Lee must be defeated. The Union Army would suffer, yes, but so too would the Confederacy. The cost was immense, but for Grant, every life lost was weighed against the greater purpose of preserving the Union. Spotsylvania Court House became the next crucible. The cavalry clashed at Todd's Tavern, the infantry flanked and counterflanked, and on May 12th, the fighting reached the infamous Bloody Angle. Here, in a section of trenches barely 300 yards long, men fought atop the bodies of their fallen comrades. Bullets cut through the trees, rain turned the earth to mud, and the cries of the wounded echoed across the battlefield. Grant's strategy was one of attrition, but it was also a test of endurance, of courage, resolve, and the very will to fight. Colonel Emory Upton's innovative assault during these days exemplified the ingenuity born of desperation. By holding fire until reaching the enemy trenches, his men pierced the Confederate lines, only to be isolated when reinforcements failed to support them. Yet even this partial success proved the method effective, and Grant adapted, issuing orders to repeat the tactic across the army. Every engagement, every loss, was a step toward ultimate victory. As the campaign pressed on, the rivers and roads of Virginia became a chessboard of maneuvering and counter-maneuvering. At the North Anna River, Lee attempted to lure Grant into a trap, adopting a V-shaped defensive line meant to crush whichever Union wing struck first. But illness, injury, and exhaustion plagued the Confederate command. Lee's plans faltered. Days of skirmishing followed, but Grant, undeterred, flanked again. Always pressing, always moving forward. The march toward Cold Harbor brought both hope and horror. On June 3rd, Union soldiers charged into entrenched Confederate positions, hundreds of men cut down within moments. Names were pinned to uniforms, so families might one day know who had fallen. The assault was a disaster, yet Grant did not retreat. The strategic goal remained Petersburg, the lifeline to Richmond, the heart of the Confederacy. Every setback was met with resilience, every failure a lesson. Sheridan's cavalry raids, Butler's cautious advances, and the continual flanking maneuvers all converged toward the inevitable siege of Petersburg. On June 15th, Union forces crossed the James River on what would become the longest pontoon bridge of the war, establishing siege lines that would last months. The attrition strategy, once theoretical, was now brutally real. Lee's army, outnumbered and exhausted, began to crumble. The cost to the Union was staggering. Between 38,000 and 65,000 casualties were suffered, more than a third of Grant's starting force. Lee's army, while smaller, endured losses equally devastating in proportion. Yet for every man lost, another stepped forward. The ranks were replenished with new recruits. The army grew, and with it, the certainty of victory. Grant's vision was realized: relentless pressure, unyielding determination, and the moral courage to see the campaign through to the end. The Overland Campaign was more than a series of battles. It was a testament to leadership, endurance, and the sacrifices necessary to preserve a nation. Soldiers endured mud, fire, disease, and relentless combat, yet they pressed on, inspired by the leadership of men who refused to yield. The bravery displayed by ordinary men on both sides of the conflict was extraordinary. Yet it was the Union's relentless machinery under Grant that ultimately dictated the outcome. By the end of the campaign, Lee was confined to siege lines at Petersburg. The Confederacy's ability to wage war was irreparably weakened. The dream of Southern independence, once fervent and fierce, began to fade. The Union, battered but unbroken, moved ever closer to the final victory that would reunite the nation and bring an end to slavery. History remembers the Overland Campaign not merely for its staggering human cost, but for the determination and courage it revealed. Grant's leadership, Lee's brilliance, and the sacrifice of tens of thousands of soldiers shaped the fate of a nation. Through fire, mud, and blood, the Union advanced, proving that perseverance, strategy, and moral clarity could prevail, even against the most skilled adversary. The lessons of Overland are timeless. They remind us that victory is rarely clean or easy. It demands courage, endurance, and the willingness to face seemingly insurmountable odds. It teaches us that leadership is not measured by comfort or convenience, but by the willingness to make decisions that serve the greater good, even at great personal and collective cost. As we reflect on the campaign today, Let us honor the bravery of those who fought and died, and let us remember that the preservation of a nation often comes at the highest price. The Overland Campaign was a crucible, a defining moment in American history, where courage, strategy, and sacrifice collided, forging a path to unity and the ultimate triumph of the Union. The Overland Campaign was not the end, but it was the turning point, a moment when the relentless pursuit of justice, freedom, and national unity began to overwhelm the forces of rebellion. Through it, the United States proved that even in the darkest hours, a nation determined to survive and uphold its ideals could endure, and ultimately prevail. For those who marched into the wilderness, who fought at Spotsylvania, who survived Cold Harbor and crossed the James, history remembers their heroism. And for those who study, learn, and reflect, the campaign offers lessons in leadership, courage, and the unyielding power of a united purpose. The Overland Campaign, with all its fire and blood, stands as a testament, not just to military strategy, but to the indomitable spirit of a nation that refused to surrender. If you want to witness history like never before, dive deep into the untold stories and explore the battles, heroes, and secrets that shaped our world. Subscribe to Unsolved History and hit the bell icon. Join us as we uncover the past with cinematic storytelling, heroic narratives, and detailed insights you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your support helps us bring more history to life. Step into the story, because every mystery of the past is waiting to be solved here on Unsolved History.